I'd like to welcome NBA champion, Andrew Gidey. Also, 5-time Olympian, Andrew Gidey, to the podcast. Andrew, how's it going?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's a pleasure. It's exciting. It's great to be in Oklahoma, and I've been here many, many years ago, but it's fantastic. And, of course, with the Adelaide 36ers here representing Australia and the NBL and the success they had the other night against Phoenix, it makes it exciting times.
What did that win mean for, like, just NBL fans in general? But obviously, like, 36ers fans are just elated. But, like, what did it mean for, like, the NBL as a whole?
Oh, it's huge. It's got a lot of attention back home because very few teams get to do that. I was reading somewhere, it was a long time ago, but I think Fenerbahce, the Turkish team, was the last team to win a preseason game. So we've been coming and doing these types of games against NBA teams for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And actually the closest was, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. And I think you still had Paul George, you still had Russell was here, and Melbourne United came and lost by a point.
Yes.
So it was, we've been close.
Yeah.
But to beat a quality team like Phoenix and the manner in which they did it, shooting 24 threes in the game, that's outrageous. In fact, although they're shorter games, I think the highest in the history of the Adelaide 36ers, and they've only done it a couple of times in their history, is they've made 20 in a game.
No kidding.
Now, that's in a 40-minute game, though.
Yeah, okay.
But I guess that what counters that is our three-point line is about 15 centimeters. I think it's about 15 centimeters closer than what yours is.
Yeah.
So it was a remarkable game, and, we're just excited and very proud. And in Australia, the NBA is huge.
Yeah.
There was a statistic. It was, a couple of years ago, but per capita, Australia had the highest subscription rates for NBA League Pass of any country in the world.
Wow.
So it's really big. And now that for the casual fan, they're going to know that, basketball here in Australia is going really well. But unless you have that tangible evidence, unless you have something objective that you can look at, they go, that's just basketball people with basketball propaganda. But then they see a result like this and go, well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
They're actually not too bad. Albeit that it's a preseason game. We keep it in that context. But even in that context, it's still a great result.
Yeah, it's impressive. I can attest to our Australian listeners. Like, we have several Australian listeners.
Good.
Even before Josh Giddey came to the Thunder, there were a lot of people that were interested in the Thunder from Australia. It's just,
I don't know if have we had another Australian player?
Steven Adams is from New Zealand.
Yeah.
For some Australians, that's close enough. For some, they're like, I'll never listen to that podcast because I don't want anything to do with the New Zealander. So you played with Josh Giddey's dad.
Yes, I did.
Warwick, for several years with the Melbourne Tigers. Would you have traded present day Josh for back in the day Warwick?
Well, you're asking me which one of my kids I love the most, because they're both great teammates and great personalities. But certainly, and I think Josh would happily, Warwick would happily concede that I think his son is maybe a little bit further advanced than what was. But the thing about it is that Warwick was an elite passer, and you see that in Josh. And there are certain things and instincts for the game that go beyond the amount of training you do. There's a bit of an instinct, something in the DNA that's enabled that, and his very unique and elite passing skills comes from his dad. His dad couldn't throw it in the ocean. His dad had the ricketiest broken jump shot you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's been one of the criticisms of Josh about his shooting, but he's so far ahead of what his dad was when it came to shooting. But his dad was tough. He was tough. He was a rebounder, elite defender, and just an unbelievable passer where he'd see things that others can't see. So he's inherited a lot of those skills.
Yeah.
But if you, to get to your question, is that, Josh would probably be a little bit ahead of where, and Josh is only a baby still.
I know. He's not even 20 yet.
Yeah.
And he's playing at this level. maybe you would have won a few more titles had you had Josh on your team.
Well, the only thing about that, if I had Josh on my team, then I wouldn't have got to play and score as much. So maybe
you think so?
Maybe it would have been better with Woz.
So you've known Josh for a long time since he was
born.
Yeah. So when could you tell that he's got it? This is a special basketball player.
Well, we knew very early on that he had some things that are hard to teach.
Yeah.
An instinct for the game, his passing ability, the way in which he coordinates with his teammates. We knew that really well. It wasn't until probably later relatively later in his development that we thought that this could be a genuine NBA player. And that probably wasn't until he was like 16, 17. So he was always really good, but he had a growth spurt. And right now, in your terms, I think I get this right, he's about 6'8".
Yeah, that's right.
So that is, and for his position, it's a huge asset.
Yeah.
And he's got such incredible upside as well. As good as he's going now, I think the shot's going to improve. I think the understanding of what's required on the defense, the understanding of the NBA game, the nuances that exist there, he's only going to get better at it. So he's got some huge upside. He's
tough as well. You mentioned his dad's toughness.
His dad was one of the toughest.
Do you have any stories about just like how tough he was, or maybe some examples of that from the Tigers? He's
your stereotypical guy that would do anything for a teammate. When a tough defensive assignment was there, he would get it. And his dad could guard multiple positions. But he was one that if you had to send a message out there, and you just needed to let some opponents know that there is an element of risk on the floor that you need to be aware of, then was that man. Whenever we played against some of the bigger teams, and I'd be harassing it, and I was a little bit like Josh, in a bigger guard, and I'd have the ball in my hands a bit, and they'd be trying to meet me up the floor and wear me down. Giddey was the first one to say, "Hey, next one, I'm going to be waiting at the center line, run them to me, and we'll create some space." So he was, he was played through adversity, pain, never whinged, stuff that people would be withering around on the floor, carrying on. He'd be up and at it again. He was just his dad was actually elite at 3 different sports. He played for the Australian national team in the juniors for Australia. He played in the NRL, which is a rugby, a type of rugby. And then he played in the Australian rugby team. And in all 3 of them, his dad played for the national team. So his dad was really skilled. And if you've ever seen rugby league or rugby union, it is a brutal game. And that's what he grew up on and was really good at. So that's where I think that toughness comes in.
Thunder fans know that from watching Steven Adams as well. Like he grew up playing rugby.
Rugby's huge in New Zealand. Rugby and rugby league are huge in New Zealand. In Australia, we also have another sport which Josh grew up on. Is Australian rules football. And that is just as brutal, but requires more skill, way more aerobic, a bigger field. You're kicking it, handballing it, and it's a tough game, which Josh loved when he was growing up as well. And throughout those formative, from the time he was, say, 10 to 14 or 15, he played both. And you take some hits, some big hits. So that's why Josh, I think, anything they're dishing up here, it's big bodies, mature bodies, but he's seen it all playing Australian rules football.
Have you been able to connect with Josh since you've been here yet?
Yeah, we were going to catch up with him, but they're already in Tulsa. So I only got in yesterday, and they're already down there. So we reached out on the phone. We're going to catch up with him. But he's busy, they're there, and they got a game tonight, then they play tomorrow, and then I leave the very first thing the next day. So I won't get to speak to him a lot or catch up with him a lot because they're on the road. But we keep in touch. He sends me messages every now and again. And he's a good kid, and he loves the game, and you guys are lucky to have him.
I know Thunder fans love having him here. his family seems pretty close. So his sister played basketball. She just transferred to Southern Nazarene, which is like really close. Yeah. Now it's basically in the city as well.
Yeah.
What did you see like just from their family, you know, seeing them kind of grow up together?
Well, his dad steals the limelight as far as their previous basketball careers. His mum played at a high level as well.
Right.
And really, when you look at his shooting and you looked at Warwick's shooting, his dad, he definitely got his shooting from his mum because, you know, Waz's technique was all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's there've been tremendous influences on him.
Yeah.
And not just his basketball skill, but his personality.
Sure.
He's a good kid, you know. Yeah. He's very respectful. He's coachable. He gets it. So we're very proud, not just of what he's done on the basketball court, but how he's grown into a fine young man.
Yeah. He definitely has showcased that. He's one of the more well-spoken 19-year-olds I've ever met in my life. Like if you just talk to him, you just had his face blacked out, you'd think you're talking to like a 30-year-old.
Well, when he was younger, he was your typical gym rat.
Yeah.
And he would come to me and talk about games that had put on the VHS.
Okay.
And you get the old VHS and he just loved to watch our old games.
Yeah.
And he played in a system that has been handed down in our club and it still exists today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little old school.
Yeah.
You know, it's a passing, cutting, offensive structure.
Yeah.
That I think really benefited him as far as his development.
Yeah.
And of course he grew, and that always helps as well. But he loves the game and is a student of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another reason we look at his basketball IQ beyond the fact that, you know, he can pass and shoot and rebound and does most facets of the game pretty well. There's those intangibles that I think because of his dad and his mum and him himself wanting to sit down in front of the television instead of watching the Teletubbies, he wants to put on a basketball game.
Yeah.
That held him in good stead.
Yeah. I think you averaged 44 points one season. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. But I don't have fond memories of that team because we were lousy.
Yeah.
Our team was going through a tough time. We had a couple of imports that left halfway through the season.
Oh, okay.
And it was nice and it looks good on the resume.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you like to hear and you guys talk about it, but it would mean more to you than it does to me. Because we only won, I think, 3 games that whole season.
Okay.
So there are a lot of meaningless points in that. And I didn't play the whole season because I was injured. But yeah, it was almost like a lot of those games where I'm putting up big numbers, they weren't as significant as what it looks on paper.
Yeah. You had an interesting career. You played mostly with the Melbourne Tigers, but you played for Seton Hall and then came back and then came to the NBA and went back and then came back to the NBA and won a championship with the Spurs. What kind of went into those decisions to do that?
Just life experiences as much as anything.
Mm-hmm.
The somewhat unusual thing when people talk about my time at the Seton Hall Pirates, where it was straight after the Seoul Olympic Games, and I was listed as a junior because although another year of eligibility was in question, because I'd went to the Olympics, I couldn't go the year previously, so we thought we were going to get granted another year.
Yeah.
But we had an unbelievable year. Went through to the championship game, lost to Michigan in one of the most difficult officiating decisions that throughout the course of my basketball career is hard to live with, because it's the foul on Ramil Robinson. Now, you're probably too young to have seen it. But it was really difficult. But the funny thing about that is because the team had so much success and I was one of the, I was a starter and had a significant contribution, it got a lot of attention. And a lot of people were suggesting that's just a hired gun. Is he really going there? The crazy thing about it is that I went to the 84 Olympics and the Seoul Olympics. And because of that, I was studying I was finding it difficult to finish my studies at university. And in fact, it was only because it was between NBL seasons, and we were amateurs back then. We were just playing for the love of the game. It was only because there was this window of opportunity where I could go and do 2 semesters, do some more credits that I went to Seton Hall. So everyone thought, well, he's not really interested in studying. It was absolutely the complete opposite of that. But yet the narrative around me and my time at Seton Hall is, wow, you've made a mockery of the system. You were the cause of all these rule changes for foreign players and all that type of thing. But it's completely the opposite. So, but that was another one, playing for PJ, and of course going through and being involved in a national championship game was, what was it, 45,000 people at the Kingdome in Seattle in the Final Four. We beat Duke in the semi-final, and unfortunately Michigan got hold of us and we lost in overtime.
How did you choose Seton Hall? Like, what was that process like?
What happened back then is it used to be colleges would play preseason games, and a lot of the times they'd invite international teams to come and play, and you'd play a series, you'd go on these tours, and I went on many of them throughout the career. Every November we'd be going and looking forward to going to the States and playing anywhere between 7 and 10 games against college teams. And in 1986, my club team, the Melbourne Tigers, we did a tour of the Big East. We played every school in the Big East. We beat Georgetown on that tour. And back then, Georgetown was this huge thing. And we beat Connecticut as well. And Seton Hall was the last stop on that tour. And my dad was really good friends with PJ's dad. And my dad knew PJ as well. And we played, and in that last game, they beat us. And Mark Bryant, who was one of the assistant coaches, he was on that team. So what happened is I had a good game. I had a really high-scoring game. And straight after that game, PJ and John Carroll, his assistant, they wanted me to stay on and said, listen, you'll be able to hook up with our team after Christmas and, come in and play. Now, at the time, my goals were firmly fixed on the Australian team and wanting to represent Australia. And, this sort of came out of the blue. And I said, listen, I really appreciate it, but I can't do it. I really want to go to Seoul. And I got this pathway. But John Carroll, the assistant coach, was relentless. Now, this is a time there's no internet. There's no WhatsApp. You can't do video. And he was calling, and back then to call the United States to Australia, he was literally calling me once a week for 2 years, saying, listen, you really can help us. You really can help us. And because of the Seoul Olympics in 88, our regular season that I played in started early, and then in 89, it went back to its normal time slot. So there was this chunk of time that fitted perfectly in with the college system and the semesters and studying and all that. So it all just, and I thought, bugger it, I'll have a go. Why not?
Meant to be.
It's a good experience. So I basically went there straight after I went from Seoul to Seton Hall. And Ramon Ramos was in the Puerto Rican team, and we played against Puerto Rico in the first game of Seoul. So I got to meet him a little bit, and it was just a wonderful experience with a great bunch of guys and lifelong memories.
So you won an NBA title with the Spurs. You kind of had a small role in that team.
I had an insignificant role on that team. You're polite in saying it was a small role. I was there. I probably would have actually got into games, maybe 20 games that season, and at junk time. Absolute junk time. So again, it was a little later in my career when that opportunity popped up. And absolutely loved the experience. Obviously, when you go through and you win a championship, but it wasn't that easy, because the start of the season we weren't going well. There was talk that Pop was going to get fired, and but it was
that's wild that he's still coaching
and he's
today.
Still there. I can still remember the bus ride. We're going to play the Houston Rockets, and we'd had a real tough start to the season. And, I was just listening in and there was genuine conversations that were being had by the players in the back of the bus.
Yeah.
If we don't win this game, Pop's going to get fired. Literally, that was the thought that if we don't win this game.
So is it like David Robinson saying that? Like who are the guys saying that?
Between Avery and Mario and, I can't remember specific, but I do remember the conversations.
Yeah.
I remember it vividly because I thought, selfishly, if Pop gets the arse here, whoever, they're not going to keep me.
Yeah.
I was more selfishly thinking it at the time, and I remember thinking, oh, man, this is – but fortunately, we won that game.
Yeah.
Went on on a bit of a winning streak, went on and won the championship, and Pop's now regarded as one of the greatest NBA coaches in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
So it's the fickle hand of fate works in mysterious ways.
Yeah,
and
it does.
It worked out then, but, my role was insignificant, but it was a privilege and an honor to be a part of it with Dave Robinson, Tim Duncan, Steve Kerr, Jerome Kersey, Will Perdue, Antonio Daniels was a young fella on the team.
He used to do broadcasts here in Oklahoma City.
I heard that.
Great
I did not
guy.
know that.
Yeah.
I think now is it New Orleans?
He's in New Orleans. Yep.
New Orleans.
Yep. For the Pelicans. He does color for them now.
Yeah.
Incredible guy.
So he's a great fella.
Yeah.
And it was a fun time. It was a really fun time, and I pinched myself of how lucky I was.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. And
yeah.
Pop was, like the recruiting process when you're trying to get players. He was brutally honest when he was talking to me about me being involved. And, he was positive, saying, listen, historically, love what you do. We've got a veteran team. I think you can fit in. Your shooting is what I really like. I think we got some with Tim and Dave. We need to spread the floor. But you need to understand this. You're coming in, and with the other players, unless something goes horribly wrong, you're an insurance policy.
Yeah.
So if someone gets hurt, then we feel like you could be around and help us. So he didn't sugarcoat it. It wasn't like he was
not much of a sales pitch.
He wasn't selling the you're going to be, some sort of mega hero.
Yeah.
And there was going to be a significant role. Not at all. But at that stage in my career, I was getting on. It was like I couldn't even believe that I was getting asked to be involved in it. So I don't know how it happened. It was just really lucky and grateful for that opportunity.
I heard you won't put on the ring. Is that true?
I don't put the ring on, no.
Yeah.
It's in the trophy cabinet, and it's a great memory.
Yeah.
And it sits right beside a signed 1999 Spurs NBA ball.
Yeah.
So it's in there. It's in the trophy cabinet. But no, I don't. I'm not a big jewelry man at the best of times. But my role or contribution was, like I said, very, very small. So I'm proud of it, and I love it. And it's a great talking piece when people come around. Everyone wants to see it because I don't do things by halves. This sucker is a sizable unit. I mean, this thing's got a bit about it. But it sits there. It's a every time I walk past it, it brings back some great memories.
So back to Josh. How do you think his decision to stay in Australia and play in the NBL, play for the 36ers, affected just his trajectory?
Well, it worked out perfectly. He had a lot of schools interested.
Yeah.
The thing about Josh, he was somewhat of a late bloomer throughout the juniors. Mm-hmm. So those early stages, he was a good player, but he wasn't a great player, and he wasn't necessarily recognized like some of our young stars are at that really early age. Like I'm talking 11, 12s, under 14s, and even in under 16s, he wasn't regarded in that top echelon.
Yeah.
So his exposure for the college teams, there was some that knew about him because there was a lot of Australian connections.
Yeah.
But he really kicked on a little bit later, and I remember his dad was pretty keen. His mum and dad were pretty keen for him to look at colleges, but they've always left those types of decisions up to him. He was he's a smart kid, but he wasn't overly motivated by school. And I think the decisions that he's made, the programs that he's been with, both in the NBL and now with OKC, have been absolutely perfect for his development.
Yeah.
He was with an Adelaide team when he was there for that 1 year.
Yep.
That they weren't in the championship window.
Mm-hmm.
And he got to play a lot.
Yep.
And he got a lot of opportunities to show what he's capable of doing. And it didn't take long for NBA teams in particular to recognize that this kid's special. So I think that decision that he made was, in hindsight, absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Anytime you make a decision that leads you to be the number 6 pick in the NBA draft, you've made good decisions.
Yeah. It's pretty wild because at the start of the season, maybe a second rounder, if people considered him that.
But absolutely.
The way that he played really, he rose up to the lottery. I don't think people even thought on draft night he'd go that high.
No.
But the Thunder obviously loved him.
We didn't.
Yeah.
And we were all thinking that I think OKC had a later pick as well, and I know the Warriors were interested. Yeah. There was a few teams.
They had 16. They had 6, 16, 18.
Yeah, and everyone was thinking, oh, well, maybe it's that later pick.
Yeah.
But just the genius of OKC, I think that it's been recognized as a really good pick.
Yeah.
And one where you're probably not going to see the full rewards for that for a few years yet, a few seasons yet.
Yep.
But I think most people have seen enough to know that he's going to be a long-term, very significant NBA player.
Yeah. So you're here to promote Australian Made. I've got a little keychain here. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, Australian, that's these tours. It's about the NBL. It's about trying to grow basketball, build relationships with the NBA, give our league exposure internationally. But it's also an opportunity for us as a nation to present ourselves to the world. Yeah. And in this case, present ourselves to the US audience. And we're all about trying to encourage people to come to Australia. Yeah. And Australia Made is an organisation that provides authenticity to Australian products and services. Mm-hmm. And that's part of that. They're the sponsor of the tour. That logo is going to be on the back of their jerseys tomorrow. And it's just trying to let people know that Australia can do some really good things, both in a sporting sense and a manufacturing sense and a whole variety of different industries we're really good at. And because Australia, Americans don't know a lot about it, and they're curious to know more. Yeah. Some of the people think we've got kangaroos bouncing down the middle of Sydney, or Melbourne. It's really advanced states and cities and with its own culture. But because there's this, they love the accent, they want to touch and feel Australia. There's a lot of industries that claim to be Australian,
right,
but not quite as Australian as others. But this little logo here with the triangle on the back and the kangaroo in it, what that represents is the genuine, accredited, authentic Australian that you industries and services and sports that you can trust.
Yeah. I have one more question. This is actually from a fan.
Cool.
So everyone knows that you and Leonard Copeland formed a dynamic duo the Melbourne Tigers in the 1990s. You were a great shooter, and LC was a great dunker.
Yeah.
You also got credited for being a great passer.
Yeah.
But be honest, how many of those great passes were really just airballed threes that Leonard turned into dunks?
That's it.
This question comes from Lee Ellis from Sunbury, Australia.
Turn it up. Come on, Lee. He's done some great things. He's another great export that you guys here have copped, and he's made a bit of a name for himself. A fun guy, really good guy. I've caught up with him a few times. Actually, we did a podcast with him as well.
Yeah.
And I think he's still doing podcasts. Is he still doing podcasts?
He works for the same company I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, clearly his judgment about my passing skills and what we developed with the alley-oop back then was Leonard was a player who played with the Clippers. One of those fringe guys that came to Australia, fell in love with it, married an Australian girl, had 4 Australian daughters, and lived there, and is now lived more in Australia than he did in the United States.
Yeah.
But yeah, we our combination between him and I and the systems that we run, and you know how you just get that rapport with someone, we're able to do it. But as I say, unless you can throw those pinpoint passes and right near the rim for them to go get, you know, he got a lot more recognition than I did for the pass. But we all know that the pass is a very critical component to the whole process.
No doubt. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show. It has been an absolute pleasure.
It's a blast, and good luck to OKC this season, and look after our boy Josh, please.
We will. Thank you.